Good morning, everyone. Just so everyone is aware, we're just allowing for people to still arrive as there was quite a bit of traffic this morning. So if you just bear with us, we should start in about 15 minutes. Thanks.
Yes, he's going to take over the show, Dave. That was ages,
要把你给后，给
But there is institutions like your own that don't understand. So what's the limit? What's the limit? Much better than 17.
Good morning, everyone. We are about to start, so if everyone can please take their seats in the next minute or two. Is it on? It's on. Oh. We are about to start, so if everyone can please take their seats in the next minute or two and come in from the outside area. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. To welcome you all here to the IDC. My name is Ayabonga Cawe. I'm the Commissioner at the International Trade Administration Commission, and I've been given a very simple task this morning to moderate the program in what I think many of us anticipate will be a very lively, robust, and certainly we would hope a very fruitful discussion. So to welcome you all, please feel free, as some would say, take off your jackets if you wish, but really welcome to everybody. But to formally welcome you, I'm going to call up at this stage the Chief Executive Officer of the National Empowerment Fund, who are our hosts today, alongside the IDC, Zid Daimani. Please give him a round of applause.
We began the process of the Legal Sector Code in 2020 when I was on the Legal Practice Council, the inaugural Legal Practice Council. And we did countrywide consultations, submitted it to the then Minister of DTIC, Mr. Ibrahim Patel, and inexplicably, it was delayed for another 3 years. And I'm really grateful to the current Minister of DTIC, Mr. Parks Tau, for gazetting it 2 months after he came, because there was no reason for the delay. But we are here now. It's been an incredible amount of work by a whole range of people in the profession and in the steering committee, because what is important is to understand that this is a Section 9, subsection 1 of the B-BBEE Act code, and therefore it is binding legally on, one, those practitioners and advocates who elect to be part of it, or to be bound by it, or to be measured in terms of BEE, and it is compulsory for state entities. So I'm really, really grateful to the NEF for not just supporting this, but to taking the lead in advocacy, and for the money that Mzi has just announced. It's a very powerful step in securing equality for Black legal practitioners, because we often forget that transformation and Black economic empowerment and employment equity, at its heart, is that it seeks to gain equality for Black people. It is not about redress or economic inclusion. Those are the side effects, but it is to ensure equality. And so when I go through the legal sector code, I'm trying not to take too long. So if we can just, who is moving it? Can we just go to slide 3? Because I don't want us to go, that's the one. And there you see that at the heart of everything we are doing in terms of this code, there is that constitutional economic imperative. It is about equality. If you can just move to the stats, I want us to go to the stats and just look at the challenges. Mzi has mentioned some of them, but we've indicated, the next slide, please. The next one, which talks about the challenges. You'll see there that the main challenge is inadequate access to a continual flow of legal work, both for attorneys and for advocates. You cannot grow, you cannot employ more people, you cannot develop skills if you don't get the work. I'm not going to repeat it, and discriminatory procurement, both in the private sector and to some extent in the public sector. Now, the public sector has done very well in terms of moving. I know the former Solicitor General who's sitting here, he's done a lot during his term to ensure that the state attorney briefs for advocates reach 83%. So that's very good. I've had conversation with the NEF and with IDC, where they also indicate that they are doing very well. The targets are 70% in the first 2 years, and they've already exceeded that. So we want to encourage them to, in relation to especially the specialized skills, because that's where a lot of Black law firms and advocates struggle. They don't get access to mergers and acquisitions, liquidations, corporate finance, structured finance. Those are the areas which we want Black lawyers to have the same access as white lawyers. Can we just go to the stats now? The next. Or let's deal with the evidence of inequality. You'll see there on the screen the stats that we have. And I'll just summarize that. The top 6 law firms in the country. We are aware, we know that they monopolize most of the private sector work because of the economic structure of our country, which is largely white-dominated. When we consider that white people constitute only 8.8% of the population and black people constitute 92% of the population, you can understand that an economy that excludes 92% and is effectively powered by 4%, because that's the male equivalent, is an economy in crisis. We are trying to prevent and overturn that crisis. If you look at the top large law firm, on average, 72% of the partners and directors are white, a majority of them being white male, and 25% are black. Also, you will find, if you look at the issue of lack of adequate access to legal work, what results in that is a stunting of black law firms. There are no major black law firms. You'll see there the largest black law firm is 18 partners. 18 partners. The largest white law firm has 396 partners. That says everything to you that you want to know. If we can go to the next slide, please. Those are just the demographic breakdown of attorneys, practicing attorneys. If you can go to the next slide. You'll see at the moment, I can't see, but I think it's 53%, but you can see that. If you go to advocates, please. That's just on a pie chart, the practicing advocates. The next one, please. You'll see there that 58% of advocates are black. Someone raised the issue, if we require in the code that 40% of in the first year, 40% of briefs from law firms should go to black advocates. Someone was suggesting that there are not enough black advocates for that. You'll see there are 58%. If the next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a further sense of the inequality within, insofar as it relates to advocates. And just using the example of the Johannesburg Society of Advocates, because they constitute the largest society in the country. Am I correct, Lizelle and Dali? They constitute. So look at those stats there. And if you can go into the next slide, senior counsel. Look at the 71% of senior counsel are white. And you know how, and we all know in the room how you become a senior counsel. It's a consistent flow of cases, especially challenging cases, and it's not easy to become a senior counsel. But look at the number, the percentages. But and only 18% are black. Can we go on to the next and look at the women? Sorry, can you just go back? Black women, like in every sector of society, they are at the bottom, particularly African women. I'm trying to see, let me put my glasses on. You'll see there that black men constitute 15% and only 5% are black females. And remember, what we do with black, we use the African colored Indians. African women are only 3%. This is a scandal. If we can go on to the next one. The attrition rates is even more shocking. In the last 5 years, 406 juniors left the JSA. And remember, this is just the JSA, it's the largest. There are other parts. We don't have the figures currently for the others. And 85% of the first 4 years of juniors who leave are black. We've met some of them. They don't get work. They can't afford to pay chamber fees. Chamber fees on the average, I don't know, Dali and Lizelle, what are they? 15 to 18,000 a month. When you start the first year, pupillage, you don't get paid. Unlike candidate attorneys, we all know that. You don't get paid. I've never understood why pupils should go for a year without getting paid. But I know when we were on the Legal Practice Council, we approached SACITA to assist. And SACITA agreed, but I think at the time it was only about 50. They could only afford 50 to pay for 50 pupils. And we did it strictly on on a means test, so black and white. Because sometimes we heard stories that pupils would literally get stranded on the way to those who had cars because they ran out of petrol. So, so what we're trying to do is, so you see the 85% were black. That's not doable. So can we go to the next one, please? So there I'm just putting the role of the state. We'll talk a lot about that, so I don't want us to delay. If you can just go to the next slide, please. So I just want to talk about the specialized scorecard. We can go on to the next one, just the targets. I'll briefly mention the targets. Can we go to the next slide, please? There we have, and I've had informal discussions with members prior to this. We've asked in the first 2 years, SOEs and organs of state should procure 70% of their work, legal work, from black attorneys. Now, we only have, and this is the thing, we only have one element in the in the code for SOEs, and that is ESD, Enterprise and Supplier Development. And they get 5 points for that. And for women, so in each element throughout the code, we have specific targets for women, and we also have young people under designated groups. So 40% in the first 2 years of all work should go to black people. If, for example, they want to brief white advocates because of specialization, they have to brief that white advocate with a black junior. And we specifically concerned about specialized areas. And it is the one, it's also the lucrative work, as I said earlier on. We want 45% per annum in specialized areas to go to black people, and they get 7 points from that. You note that it's more than the 5 points because we think it's so important. And then 25% for people from designated, which is young women, young people, black women, and people with disabilities. Can you go on to the next one? We can ask questions. So this is quite important, partnering, joint venturing, and subcontracting. That's also very important because often you do find that there's a lack of specialized skills amongst black firms, and SOEs are clients and state organs of state are clients, and they obviously want the best skills, And so if it's not possible that black people have some specialized skills, although there are some black firms with specialized skills, they must try and do joint ventures and subcontracting. And we've given that target as 65. If we can just go to the next slide. Now, the Charter Council, of which I'm the chairperson, which is appointed by the Minister of Justice for a period of 5 years, and its role is to monitor implementation of the code, to make sure that it's complied with both by the public sector, provide guidance, and we've issued, our website should be live. We're in the process of setting up our website should be live in the next few weeks. So it would provide guidance, issues clarification notice. We've already done that. We're liaising with verification agencies because they have to get accredited for verification in terms of the code, because they've been using the generic codes up to now. Then also we will be filing annual reports, or we'll be getting annual reports from SOEs and from attorneys, and we then in turn compile annual reports submitted to DTIC and to the BE Commission. Now, if I'd like to talk about the Legal Transformation Fund, and as I'm saying, I'm very grateful and so happy with NEF contribution. We have been talking and we're very excited about that. Can you go into the next? So we've already, I think Mzi's already indicated, but the skills development and enterprise and supplier development will be very important. Black firms sometimes don't have the capital or the money to get libraries, and as you all know, libraries are fundamental to a law firm, and so we will assist, the fund will assist firms and advocates with that. Then there's areas, specialized areas of the law. We are very, very intentional about ensuring that over the next 5 years, after our term ends, there'll be a significant difference. And we've spoken to a number of SOEs and organs of state, and they are very keen to work with us, including the NEF. So we're very, very grateful for that. We'll also give support to candidate attorneys and pupils, and we will set up a separate group to advise the council about that. And, you know, for entities, for state-owned entities, those are the risks if there's non-compliance, but we hope that we don't have to, that those risks won't materialize. I think that's all that I have to say. If there are any questions later on, I'm happy to answer those. Thank you.
Oh, no, this mics are here. It seems I'm the only one who might not have one. So we'll have to share. Okay. You bring one first. You can speak from there if you don't mind. From where you're sitting. Okay, let's maybe first, once again, thank Mama Christine for those scene-setting remarks, as sobering as they might have been. Please give her a round of applause. And I think those remarks are a perfect segue to our panel. And Advocate Mpofu, I want to start with you. It seems that much of what we see in the code, and similarly what has given rise to the code, is a attitude in the society that this constitutional and even legal obligation is a discretionary thing. Has that been your observation in the last 2 decades or so?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, Deputy Minister and other honored guests. Yeah, it has, and I think that's a very fundamental question. You know, I described myself earlier as a BEE skeptic. And that's because I've been through this, I don't know for how many decades now. So actually I had stopped coming to BEE meetings until recently. I just said it's just too much. It's not just for my heart. Just anecdotally, there's a colleague of ours, Khomutso Moroka, who's a senior counsel, female senior counsel. And when I came back to the bar, she actually, every time we had meetings of advocates for transformation, she said, as long as one of the topics is not briefing patterns, because she had had enough of that. And that was 15 years ago already. So some of us have been battered by this, yeah. But to come to your question, I think that is the discretion versus compulsion question is at the heart of the problem. And that is why I've lost all faith in the B-BBEE Act and anything to do with it. The problem that we have is that we have made it optional to transform, number one. Number two, we have made it look like it's a favor. Like, you know, please, could you kindly, give us equality? It can be. If, as Christine was saying, we all understand that the fundamental issue here is a historical problem of colonialism and apartheid and legislated inequality. And enforced inequality, not enforced in just laws. I mean, in killing people, in making sure that this one doesn't go there, and so on. Enforced in the strongest possible meaning of that word. And then we think that the reversal of that brutality is going to be done from the kindness of the heart and all that. Then I'm afraid all of this will come to zero. So the keen understanding of what it is that we're transforming from and towards is important. But also, Abonga, the issue of Section 9 of the Constitution, the fact that Section 9(2) of the Constitution allows for measures of transformation and so on, and reversal of the inequities of the past. That is what is not appreciated. And therefore, we don't understand that this is about equality and justice. I mean, just look at the irony of the fact that you have to tell lawyers about justice. You have to force them and give them scorecards and so on. I would have thought anyone who's a lawyer should inherently be searching for justice and equality. But we know that the experience is that there's more than resistance. There's actual hostility against this, indicated, for example, by the current litigation that is going on. So, for me, honestly, I'm sorry, but I'm not, I spent like 2 years of my life drafting something called, about 20 years ago or so, something called the ICT-BEE Charter, with all the zeal and energy, and we had meetings like this, hundreds of them across the country, consulted with this one and that one. And nothing has happened, really, since then. So I have two things to say about what needs to happen since we've been asked to look for solutions. I think that the two areas that we need to emphasize on are what in the charter is called monitoring and evaluation, the thing that Christine was talking about. Even those many years ago, I was a proponent of not even, I think monitoring and evaluation is just another nicety. It should be policing. And I like people who use that it should be policed, literally. I think that if you can strengthen that element, I promise you, if you had a real policing regime, I would leave my job and I'd be the chief policeman. I'd be the Mkwanazi because that really is at the hub of this whole thing. Think about it like this. If SARS were to say, look, people, you know, it's a bad thing that you don't pay tax. And, you know, we can build schools, we can build clinics and all that, and really we're appealing to your heart. Which one of us would pay tax? I wouldn't. I can tell you that much, yeah. So the only reason that we pay tax is because SARS has a very serious policing mechanism which can land you in jail if you don't comply. And it's not, and the case for paying tax is more compelling than everything we're saying here. But if SARS were just to leave it to say, you know, the rich people must really find it within themselves to do this, then we wouldn't have a country. So it's the same with this. If you don't have like a draconian policing mechanism, it's not going to happen.
Okay, Advocate, what's the second one? I get that one. Punitive deterrent, punitive sanction or effective deterrent. You said there's a second one.
Yeah. No, the second one is the one that the NEF was talking about, which is the funding. I think that, for me, and it's related to the first, if we can put money, and real money, not the kinds of amounts we are talking about here, 600,000, 1 million rand, no, that's not going to cut it. I'm talking like big bucks. And maybe the government, since the deputy minister is here, should do that. Put maybe, I don't know, 100 million rand or whatever, and then ask the private sector to match. You know, just a model that is like the skills development thing, based on turnover or whatever. I'm not worried about the mechanics. But you need a lot of money to ensure that there is this proper policing, there is effectiveness, there is, at the minutest level, if you know what I mean. Because the white firms have developed, and the government, and even the private sector. And that, by the way, is another topic. One of the biggest culprits in this thing is the government. Because if the government really wanted to have even this, look at the statistics that Christine was putting there, that the largest black firm has 18 partners and the largest white firm has 396. I can tell you now, if the government was serious about changing just that picture, in the first 10 years, forget about 30 years, it would have changed.
All right, Advocate, I want you to pause there, because there's quite a bit there, and I really welcome the two systemic and institutional proposals you're making. Advocate Lizelle, I want to bring you in, because both the Advocate Mpofu and also Advocate Kunta have raised this looming specter of the litigation. And I want to get, just from your vantage point, what is your sense of what is at issue there? What's the nub of the contention? I mean, if I was elsewhere, I'd be asking, like, Bangwani, what are we fighting about? Insofar as the codes are concerned and the big brouhaha that we're seeing out in the public about them.
Okay, thank you and good morning. The legal sector code, and I think I want to start there, is our own blueprint in the legal profession to fairness. And Christine will tell you that it doesn't preach transformation. It actually measures transformation, like Dali envisions. And so we have to now, in answering the question, start where the law starts. And the law starts with Section 9 that empowers measures designed to promote the achievement of equality. And then we take it to the B-BBEE Act. And the B-BBEE Act provides that national framework that says how do we empower and ensure participation of black people in the economy, and more specifically in the legal profession. And if we bring it slightly home to where Christine is and the seat that she sat in, is Section 5 of the Legal Practice Act obligates the council to ensure access into the profession. And so, rightfully said, it's not just a statutory obligation, it is a constitutional obligation that we sit with. Not just the council, but everybody in this room. And so if we understand that, whether the litigation succeeds or the litigation against the legal sector code succeeds or fails, that obligation still stays. Now, with that in mind, where does the big firms come from? So what is their viewpoint? We have obviously the generic codes, which they have been complying with or operating under. And my understanding of the litigation is that they have been performing, so much so that they're reaching that level 1B status under the generic codes. Now, if we just look at what the performances are, and I touch very peripheral on this. The first is there is that skills development, and it typically looks like the donations made to your law firms, donations also made to law associations and organizations. But what's lacking in there is your skills transfer and real work transfer. And then if we look at where the procurement spend was going, the procurement spend then looks at outside, it also looks outside of legal practitioners. So the infamous catering spend, or when you're looking at your support business units, the support business units then speak to IT, HR, and the like. And so when you're complying, or when you're reaching that level 1B status, to some extent it relates to that kind of compliance. So what we need to do is we need to take a step back. And as we take the step back, we need to ask a critical question. Does that compliance with the generic codes transform the legal profession? And if we're still having the conversation, and if we have people like Dali that are skeptics, that don't want to be part of discussions because they've got the scars, then it says that not nearly enough has been done within the space. And the reason for that is because ownership, decision-making, and meaningful briefs has hardly shifted within the legal space. And so what the legal sector code seeks to do is to then, and I know Christine just said that it's not supposed to correct, but it puts measures in place to correct the disparities so that it doesn't, the legal structure doesn't continue to benefit or advantage some and disadvantage others. And so my sort of just in closing on that one is that when you look at the heart of the issue, again, I was talking about the skills transfer and the procurement, but really the heart of the transformation and maybe the application is talking to the ownership and also talking to the management control. Because when you transfer, or when you promote meaningful transformation, what you're getting is who owns, who decides, who leads the team, who gets the work, and who earns the money. And so if we're shifting that, I do think that the application is to push back on that kind of irritation. And then finally, because we're advocates, we're concerned about the meaningful exposure to work. And so for the first time as advocates, what we're getting is not the discretionary, not the bar policy initiative. What we're getting is institutionalized mechanisms, verifiable measures that look at advocates and say, how do we ensure equitable briefing? So the application, although comes from your big firms, also tries to push out the entire legal sector code, discounting the benefits to the advocates profession, but also discounting the benefits to the smaller firms, who now, if they are able to meet the new criteria, stand to gain the state-owned entity government department work, which, and I know the number's debatable because the data's not clear, but it's a 50 billion rand per annum legal service market. And if you are able to tap into your state-owned entity government work, you're getting access to a significant component per annum of the work that is in the legal service market. Thank you.
Thanks, Lizelle. And I do want us to circle back, I think, to the kind of organs of state issue, because Advocate Mpofu had also raised it. But Didi, let me bring you in, because Mamkunda shared some very sobering statistics earlier about the role of Black and African women within the space, and in particular even younger women. And it's quite startling if one considers that, Section 9 of the B-BBEE Act actually says in how you set targets, you must make provision where you ought to for some distinction between targeting of inclusion and participation of Black women vis-a-vis Black men. And so it's a very explicit kind of reference there. Your own assessment of how far we've come, but also in line with what we've already started to do. What can we do about it?
Well, I think what's important to note about the struggles and the difficulties of young Black professionals, and in particular African females, is that there are barriers and there are invisible biases that exist, and they're quite troubling. And I think the most pervasive yet unspoken barrier in big law is the tendency to believe that you have not earned your place, but you're actually a diversity hire, or you're a BEE hire, as they'd call it. And this is quite troubling because what it translates to is being valued for the optics, but not necessarily for the meaningful and substantive work. And so, whilst we're given learning opportunities, we're not given leadership roles. And while we're exposed to mentorship to an extent, we're not meaningfully sponsored. And so what this ends up looking like is we're visible at the career fairs and at the summits and the engagements and on the brochures and the PowerPoint presentations, but when it comes to real commercial risk and real power, we are completely invisible. And so what invisible biases tend to look like in these spaces, particularly for Black attorneys and African females, is exclusion from high-value work, complex work, especially where client comfort is cited as a concern.
What's client comfort?
Client comfort it's a barrier. It's a barrier, as Dali says. It's a trusted advisor, and so it is saying that on the team for this transaction, I need someone with at least 7-8 years PQE, and they'll name their requirements, and it's requirements that we just don't have. We don't meet them because we haven't been exposed, or we don't have the years of experience. And so what this ends up, looking like is that there's not enough work as well to meet our targets. And that becomes a difficulty. We're overcoached and undertrusted. Yeah. So, yeah. Overcoached and undertrusted, yes. And this then limits our exposure to key decision making. Invisible bias also looks like double standards in performance reviews, where black people's work is overly scrutinized or disproportionately scrutinized and underpraised. It can also be double standards as far as benefits are concerned, but I'm not talking monetary or financial benefits. I mean the benefit of attention, the benefit of a conversation on your career, just that, come into my office, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years? Let's talk about your career. And, benefits such as coaching and sponsorship and things like that. And what I've also experienced and what I've also observed is arbitrary treatment. And it's arbitrary. I don't know where it comes from. It's random. For example, I experienced a situation where I went on maternity leave, and so did a colleague of mine who was a white female. There was nothing different about us. Same practice group, same team, both associates, but same financial year, and both pregnant. But why is it that when I returned, I was expected to continue meeting a target of 144 billable hours per month, and she wasn't? And this is not speculative. This is something that was queried specifically and confirmed on the 27th of September in 2023, when a business analyst confirmed this to me. But she obviously did not mean to. I think she'd be in a lot of trouble, but that's what had happened. And finally, one of the invisible sort of barriers we see is an assumption around cultural fit, which then, and what is a cultural fit, right? I don't know if maybe it's looking like me, I've got the hair, it's not being maybe authentically yourself. You need to present yourself in a particular way when you're in these spaces. And these become gatekeeping tools in partnership tracks.
We'll circle back, Didi, to kind of what we can do about it. But I think it's quite startling, some of the things that you're saying. And Tata Mohammed, I want to bring you in here because we'd mentioned earlier on the point of the state as well being party to some of the problem. And I speak for myself in this instance. We issue more than 300 forms of authorizations every year. Almost all of those authorizations require somebody to have a tax clearance. Some of them require firms to be compliant with the bargaining council. Only one of those requires that you be compliant even with the generic codes, let alone the prevailing code, if there is one in the sector. And we can debate, maybe DM on another day, whether we need more codes in manufacturing. But what can organs of state, and in particular SOCs and Schedule 3 entities, do a bit differently to contribute to the fight?
Could I answer that question on the second round? And I need to, I'm a bit concerned about Advocate Mpofu's cynicism. And
despondency, maybe.
I wouldn't go as severe as that. But I think it's necessary because as you were speaking, what was coming out were the contradictions and our own hypocrisy. So on the one hand, I really think it is appropriate that we've got to compliment the legal profession in the last 30 years for giving life to a constitution. We have a constitutional state now that is still marveled around the world. And it has withstood challenges of seismic proportions, but we still prevail. But therein lies the contradiction. It's almost like we're cherry picking. Because we take pride in certain values, but the core value was about transformation. It was about bringing exclusion, people who are excluded, severely excluded by a system, in the mainstream of life. It's about giving dignity. And what we do is we tend to emphasize the things that makes us feel sexy and the hard work we tend to ignore. So there's just one statistic that, Mrs. Kunta, I don't know whether I was facing this way, but it's the pipeline of candidate attorneys. I think the statistic around now is that 70% of the candidate attorneys are now black. It may be subject to correction, but even if that is so, the problem is structural. There's a bottleneck. And I changed deck after you spoke, Advocate Mpofu, and you were part of the constitution-making process. So strategically and tactics-wise, what is it that incentivizes people to enter into an agreement or into a negotiation? And that's some of the key questions we've got to start asking ourselves. One of the ironies, and it's somehow we think in silos, I was telling Commissioner earlier, that we think in terms of silos. There is an emerging black middle class. If you look at the buying power in this country, for all of the weaknesses in what has happened in this country, that, depending on what ideology you look at, has been a success. If you look at the clientele of the firms that you are now scrutinizing, look at the demographics of this clientele. So it is in the interests, business interests, of the very people we want to address to widen the scope. Because it is precisely for the interventionist measures that were taken place. You can't take total credit for it, that we've had this emerging black middle class. So there's somehow a disjuncture in the logic. And I think we need to think strategically about this, because perhaps there's a gap in the thinking.
But why is there no enlightened self-interest on the part of some of those who are, I guess, the beneficiaries, as you say, of the spending power of this black middle class?
You know, socialization is a weird thing. This is structural exclusion. And you know, it's nice to criticize. I've learned this a long time ago. But to come up with alternatives, to remove things is very good. To come up with alternatives. So we're going to attack the codes and BEE. And sorry, with respect, Advocate Mpofu, I understand your frustration. Come up with alternatives. But the objective remains transformation. And that is where the hard work has to be done. And it's not done. So I just thought that, yes, I take the point about policing and that we've got to start looking strategically at what incentivizes the people to enter into a negotiated settlement. I will discuss this after the third question. I have a few pointers, but I think we can discuss this. But right now, it's said that 30 years down the line, we have the most progressive legislation in the world. I promise you, as far as transformation is concerned. But we're still asking these questions. Perhaps we need a different tact here.
No, Tata Mohammed, you can't leave us like that. There's something I want you to unpack. So you're saying...
I like the way you called me Uncle Mohammed.
Yeah, you are Tata Mohammed, to me at least. No, I must ask this, because you're saying what would incentivize somebody to get into a negotiated settlement? Now, that's a broad question, but it might be even specific to our discussion here. Because it starts to raise what tactically should we also be bringing to the party alongside what we might inscribe into a code.
So are our codes, the adherence to it, just a mechanical compliance? What is it that we must do to go beyond just mechanical compliance? I know Advocate Mpofu has said that people don't talk of Mother Goose and apple pie and think about changing the world. They have to be incentivized or policed, as you say. But the point is we don't have a shared vision. Let's accept that. We are 30 years down the line and that vision hasn't aligned. The second thing is, I think the mechanical approach, we need a strategy around that. Is it about developmental impact? Or is it just a tick box exercise? What is it that we have to look at? And these are some of the issues we must explore. Is it a failure of leadership from all sectors of society, accountability? What is it? How do we change a narrative in a society when transformation is seen as synonymous to incompetence? It's our fault. We've got to change that narrative. And that's what it is. That's what the exclusion, these are the niceties that we are told. No, we must uphold merit. These, that's what's been told. I mean, these are the little cliches we've been encountering for the last 30 years. How do we change our mindset? Again, I'll come back to this later if you don't mind. Just be a little patient.
Yeah, no. No problem, Tata. We are a bit impatient. We are of the younger cohort. So we're a bit impatient. But Advocate Mbofu, one of the things that was spoken to by Advocate Kunda earlier in resolving not just the issue, Mama Kunda, in resolving the issue of specialization and some of the issues there. And there was also a word, Mama, that you used, stunting. So people enter the industry, but the terms on which they're able to advance presents a bit of a complication. Tactically, what do we do?
Look, let me just say this first. This is not a theoretical discussion. These things, I don't know how many people have actually experienced this. We have had, in the past 20, 30 years or so, I can't tell you how many people I have personally interacted with, black women, black men, who come into the space. You work with them, you see enormous potential and promise, and literally sometimes even superstardom that is embedded in them. And then a year later, what Christine was talking about happens. You just, maybe you don't see the person and then you come and say, oh, I remember there was this person who gave me such a good product. I want to, and they tell you, no, I'm gone or I'm going or whatever. Because simply the system is designed to frustrate and exclude people. And therefore you have this attrition, which is very tragic. I mean, I'm talking about, I can give you names and surnames of people like that, yeah. So that's what we're talking about. I think if we talk about this at a kind of general esoteric level, it doesn't really tell you. This thing about cosmetic change, I've experienced it when I was still interested in this kind of thing. About 15 years ago, I was in the Bar Council, and I literally single-handedly forced the bar, the Johannesburg Bar, to introduce something which was called the 3-counsel rule. And that said, you cannot have, in any court case, you can't have 3 advocates and all 3 of them are white. The third one has to be black and preferably female. And my secret agenda then was that after a few years I'm going to change it into a 2-counsel rule. Yeah. But I think I got exhausted before I reached that. But the point is that after a whole lot of kicking and screaming, that rule was introduced. But exactly what happened? You had horror stories of people being asked, oh, just, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is just to sit there and be black. Yeah. So you don't get trained, you don't get into, to learn anything. Okay, it's nice to have money when you haven't worked. All of us like money, yeah. But that's not that can't be what transformation is about, yeah. So that's what I'm saying, that these things go beyond the surface. And that is why I'm of the view that if we don't strengthen the funding and the policing aspects, we're not going to go anywhere. For example, this issue of not getting paid for a year. It shouldn't happen. I mean, we should have a fund that gives you a sufficient stipend to survive. you know, and kind of soft landing in the first 3 years and that kind of thing. Even if it means when you then get to 5, 10 years, you actually reinvest yourself into that fund so that it grows. So that's the kind of thing that I think we should be debating. Not this thing of, you know, let's try and be nice to each other. It's never going to work here. And the white firms in particular, let me just say this maybe because I want to be controversial on this. Yeah. When we talk about redressing the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, I think that we must go further. There's a legacy of colonialism and apartheid and the legacy of the last 30 years. And the legacy of the last 30 years might well be more serious than all those other legacies. Because, let me tell you, if you, okay, you know, you can't stop inequality by increasing inequality. That's madness, probably. So what we are doing, we've been doing the past 30 years, is to increase the inequality gap, over-empower the white firms, over-empower the white advocates, to the extent that the gap might well be worse than it is now. They didn't have all these fancy buildings here in Sandton in 1994. And therefore, that's what I'm saying to you, that we will be sitting here, I promise you, in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, saying all these things, if we don't grapple with that issue. If we don't grapple with the inequality issue. Because inequality is a scientific thing. It's not just something in the thin air. So I think, for example, myself, when I see some of these percentages, they just make me mad. Because you see, and I'm now addressing the Deputy Minister. Just think about it for a second. When you're saying 40% of work must go to black people, what are you actually saying? You're saying 60% must go where? You know, it's never going to work, people. You know, we have to ask the difficult questions. When you say black means African, Indian, colored, what do you mean? What do you mean? Do we know that apartheid itself was not administered equally in those three groups? When you equate black women to white women, what do you mean? Honestly? How can you say people who were beneficiaries of the system and, you know, were swimming in the whites-only beach and riding on the whites-only bus, suddenly are at the same position as my mother? No, man, no.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I hope, DM, you will have occasion as you reflect to engage that. Lizelle, let me bring you in.
I'm worried about going after Dali.
Yeah. No.
I don't know if you can, but I can feel the energy.
Yes. But I also think that Advocate Mpofu, in the controversy, also has put a proposal down, which is saying if what you are confronted with is people not being paid for a considerable amount of time, what do you put in place to ensure that that doesn't happen? And not all of that sits in a code. Some of it sits in a fund. Some of it takes a different form than the code. I'm interested in the same thing, Lizelle, as it relates to lucrative and complex legal work. It's one thing to put that in a code and say, I want on competition or on insolvency law or any other specialist types of law that you have a particular configuration. It might be subject to the same issues that Didi and Advocate Mpofu were raising. What else do we need, and what form does that what else take?
Okay. I think the premise must be that we have to categorize and call out what gatekeeping is generally. And then we've also got to identify what those structural barriers are. And it's what we talk about here, and it's obviously what you're familiar with in the room. But when we're looking at gatekeeping generally, what we say is it's the formal and informal mechanisms that control entry, that control participation, and that control advancement. And so your formal structures or your formal mechanisms is your pupillage requirements, and I speak from an advocate perspective. It's your pupillage requirements, and the requirements include that you can't work or really earn anything during that pupillage year for 12 months. Then it's also, once you've now moved from pupillage into practice, which group you get into, which bar gives you membership. And so those are the formal mechanisms that gatekeep. The informal ones, and it was something Christine and I talked about earlier, is your social networks, your access to mentorship, your word-of-mouth recommendations. Those are the soft, hidden ones that also create gatekeeping. I mean, at some times it's benefited me and other times it's disadvantaged me. But we're not looking at me, we're looking at advocates across the board, irrespective of race, gender, and exposure. So if we look at the gatekeeping, and it's something I said earlier, it then also says who gets into the room, who gets the work, who gets to earn the fee. And the work, when I say work, it extends beyond what we term general litigation to your more specialized areas of law. And so that's what the gatekeeping does. If we look at your structural barriers, and I've made a note about this because this is your features that is inherent in the structure and the system that Dali talks to. And I've noted 5 of them. The first is there is state and corporate clients that reappoint the same firms. And that's what DD says, that I tend to go as a SOE, a government department, a corporate client, I tend to go to the same trusted advisor, the one with the track record. And so that is a structural barrier to new entrants. The second is there's a panel composition, and that panel composition often has limited rotation. And so what we're doing is we're allowing certain people in, we're keeping them in, we're allowing them to participate and advance to the exclusion of others. And others could be new into the advocate's profession, others could be new into the area or specialized area of law. And so that is a significant one specifically for advocates. A third, and this is the controversial one, is exposure and experience is always equated with competence. Now, you're not competent in a particular area of law, not because you don't have the knowledge or intellectual ability. It's because you haven't been exposed to that kind of work and you've not gained that kind of experience to get the competence. And so when we say we can't brief Lizelle because she doesn't have the competence in customs and excise, it's just that I haven't had experience or exposure in it. The fourth one, and this one is the one that takes you on the long road, is if you have access to network. Once you have access to network, that work opportunity opens up. I'd also mentioned earlier that I have a colleague I used to work with at SARS, and we've had a very good working relationship, especially because I tried to put in the effort, and I was quite determined and dedicated to the area of tax. So when he went to a law firm, he briefed me. When he went to Deloitte, he briefed me. And so when you have that kind of access to that kind of network, ordinarily private taxpayer work shouldn't be coming to me, but it comes to me because of my access. And that's also a barrier because it shouldn't be about Lizelle and who Lizelle knows. It should be about every advocate that gets into the sector that wants to practice, that should have an open network, or a network shouldn't be a barrier. And then the last one, and this one, Dali says he's speaking to DM and I'm speaking to NEF, is financial constraints. It's a significant thing, and Christine's stats demonstrate factually that who enters and how they leave. And the major contributor for that is then, can I afford to stay in practice? I have the competence, like Dali says, I'm that superstar, but I'm going to get, one, I've not worked for a year, two, during pupillage. My first year of practice, I'm building a business, right? Like the law firm, I'm also building a business. I've now also got to obtain clients. And in order to obtain clients, I've got to get work done. And sometimes you're not in a position to invoice immediately. And so by the time you get to invoice, maybe a month, 2 months has passed. Then you invoice. Then you have to wait. There's a 97-day rule that's being discussed at the AFT AGM tonight. But then you have 97 days to wait. If you're lucky, you get paid. Sometimes it escalates to 6 months, 1 year. But in the meantime, you've got chamber fees. You've got financial commitments that come monthly, irrespective of whether or not you've been paid. And so that financial implication is a significant one.
But Lizelle, what could be the deterrent? You know, if someone's not going to pay you in 97 days and there's no deterrent to kind of impel them to pay you, is it costless for them to kind of pay you after 200 days?
I haven't worked in a firm, and Didier and the lawyers in the room might know better. But I'm assuming that every attorney takes a deposit up front and sort of estimates more or less what that fee would look like. And so you're sitting with that money, and I'm assuming if it's big, lucrative matters, your deposit is bigger and you're earning the interest on it. So nothing stops you from paying within the 30 days after the invoice has been submitted from the advocate, because even by that time, by the time we'd invoiced, we have already spent the work and the time, and we've spent, or we obligated to the overhead commitment or the financial obligation. But just in closing, and I want to fast track to, because I am a female counsel.
I've been told that we don't have a lot of time, but please go ahead.
Then I close. But with female black counsels, we have a triple threat, right? 1, race; 2, gender; 3, and it's for the young ones specifically, inexperience. And so when we look at the legal sector code, and it's specifically designed to eliminate or at least deal directly with that triple threat, it's something that we should embrace, yeah.
All right. Didi, you mentioned in your first input that there are many ways you characterize it. Many of you and your counterparts are overcoached, undertrusted. There are many other elements. You mentioned fit earlier on. What do you think could be the elements of a systemic agenda to try and deal with that and effectively create, I don't know if I would call it better cushioning, but better support mechanisms for young professionals in the sector?
Sure, thank you for the question. I think before we answer that, we need to actually look at what this gatekeeping does to a person's career. And effectively, it ends up, and the trajectory of their career and the effect it has on their career. And the effect is that, you know, your career stagnates, but it's disguised as development. So while you have a differentiation between how, the work that you entrust white attorneys with versus black attorneys with, it shows in that, it reflects in that. It reflects in the way in which our contemporaries are groomed. They get the benefit of golf days and paddle matches and the golf course meeting, and this is how they are groomed for leadership and for practice management, whereas as black people, as black attorneys, we're told, wait your turn, you know? And then this effectively slows down not just your individual career, but the entire pipeline of Black excellence, that bottleneck that was discussed in senior leadership. So the outcome is one that it looks, the firm or the fraternity looks diverse at entry level, but it's homogeneous at the top, right? And this is taking a toll on young Black attorneys. You know, just quickly to mention, you know, they internalize this isolation of not being good enough, of not meeting targets, and they start to believe that they are the problem, whereas in fact, they're not being given the support or the coaching or the work to even meet their targets. And so it's placing high demands on our Black attorneys, and it leads to stress and anxiety and burnout and chronic imposter syndrome. And when in reality, you're purposefully being sabotaged or not being given the work. And it's no wonder we have the exit rate that we had of Black attorneys leaving not just practice, but the profession entirely. And it's not because they are not capable or lack the talent, but it's because they were never given the soil to grow. Sure. And so we see this in the statistics that Black and brown people, they enter this fraternity in large numbers, and then they are nowhere to be found in partnership 5-10 years down the line. So in terms of what can be done, well, I don't know.
Okay, Didi, let's do it like this. So that, as Advocate Mpofu was saying, as we wrap up briefly, we are not having this discussion in 30 years' time. You have 30 seconds. One thing you would do so that a Didi 30 years from now is not speaking about the horrific a story that you're sharing with us.
Sure. No, that's easy to think about in a sense, because I have a son, and I think about, you know, what if one day he wants to come for vacation work and do his articles, and I think deeply about it. Is this a fraternity I would actually want him in? The answer is no.
Okay, so you don't even have one. You just don't want him to be a lawyer. Fair.
I would love for him to be a lawyer. I think, and I'm going to steal Advocate Mpofu's answer, is to say that to ensure that, yes, exactly, to ensure that we're not having this conversation 30 years down the line, policing.
Okay, Lisa, your one measure?
I have 4 short, quick ones.
One.
It's difficult, but hear me out. The first one is that there has to be procurement accountability. We have to have SOEs and state and government departments, including
Sure, part 4.
And then the last one is financial support.
Okay, all right. I think we must start in the interest of time. So thank you so much to our panelists. I'm going to start with Noor. Mr. Kapti, can you tell us maybe, so Denton's is a very large law firm, international law firm. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your approach as a big law firm, and why do you take the transformation imperative so seriously?
Yeah, thank you very much, Karishma. And again, thank you to all of our previous contributors. There was much to learn, much to hear, and much to agree with. Special thanks to my dear friend Christine, who's been at this for her entire career. And so getting to this point, I think, is very important. So about 13 years ago, so let me just very quickly, Denton's is only 13 years old as a global law firm. 13 years ago, I had a conversation with the chairman and the CEO of this firm, this new big law firm. And they wanted to enter the country, and they were speaking to a whole host of law firms, the big ones, the small ones. And I think the simple question was, is this country going to be more black than it is white in the future? Is the legal profession going to be more black than it is white? And the answer to that is logically very much yes. Well, then the next law firm, the global law firm in this country, has to be black, has to be owned, controlled, and managed by black people. So that was the condition upon which I had agreed to accept the brand and build this Denton's South Africa, which is owned, controlled, and managed by black folk. Here's the problem. It doesn't matter that you're the largest law firm in the world. It doesn't matter that you have offices in 100 and goodness knows where, 46 cities in the world. In this country, you're still black. And so it's very important that we ask these questions. In this country, there's still a huge differentiation between the 5 or 6 big firms who are white firms and the black firms. So can you imagine what is happening in other black firms who do not have this global brand, the global technology, the phenomenal capability that a firm like ours has? That's probably going to take many, many years and not $100 million, not $5 million. You're going to need a whole lot more dollars to be able to build this, to be able to build the kind of firm that we can compete with. So I think that's the short answer, the short version of the answer. Why was this important? Because it was not an option. It is not a choice. It's a foolish person's choice to think that the profession must stay the way it is.
Thank you, Noor, for that. Let's welcome Fedzani Pandelani, the ex-Solicitor General, to the panel. Mr. Pandelani, can you maybe tell us about if the power is in the hands of government and its institutions to advance BEE and brief black practitioners, why is the status quo still the way that it is? And your experience from your knowledge of what happens in public sector and in government and SOEs, why is the picture not changing dramatically, at least from that perspective?
No, thank you very much. I think the first panel covered a broad spectrum of issues of what is wrong in relation to procurement of state legal services. And so one of the issues that actually needs to be interrogated is when I was appointed as the Solicitor General in 2020, there were quite a number of problems in relation to procurement of state legal services and consumption. Government departments were operating in silos. There was no centralized command center. And we soon realized that some other practitioners were invested in certain government departments, and there was no overseer. You could not even subject it to audit because it was a tick box kind of an exercise. And in the first year, one of the issues that one had to interrogate was that we were confronted with the statistics that government has spent about 7 billion rand in procurement of legal services. But when you looked at the transformative agenda on the utilization of that money, there was very little that has been invested in black practitioners. You would look at the amount that has been spent by government, and every time that you, in fact, had stakeholder engagements, black practitioners will be telling you, where is this money going? And we were then, in fact, required, only then, by the way, to come up with policies that Cabinet had actually instructed should be developed. So we only started moving or pivoting towards the right direction in 2020. And the Office of State Attorney has been there from 1957, when there was only one state-owned entity, the South African Railways and Harbors, which looked after the white establishment. We now actually have, and DM is here, no less than 704 state-owned entities, boards and agencies, all of whom are consuming state legal services, but not transforming the landscape. And that is where the problem is. We also talk about lucrative work. But I think let's confront the elephant in the room. Lucrative work resides within DTIC. You're talking about mergers, acquisitions, competition, and all these other government departments do not have that kind of lucrative work. So DTIC, Advocate Boof, is aiding and abating the 6-7 tall buildings in Sandton. And we don't talk about that. Because in each and every transaction, there should be 3 parties. When you talk competition, there will be one party here and the other party here and somebody from the other side. And if we're to start from the government side and say, let's push the needle in the right direction, we should be talking a different language now. And so there is something called briefing and outsourcing of state legal work. It's only starting to work now. The statistics that the chairperson of the Charter Council is talking about is something that in fact we had to realize within a span of 4 years. The policing that we are referring to is something that in fact resides with the Auditor General. The Office of the Solicitor General, in its creation, is also not properly packaged, because appropriation and vote for legal funds go to the various government departments. So basically, as an office, you are coming up with a policy, but you are overseeing money that belongs to other government departments. Very difficult, because soon you will realize that you are fighting. At that rate, you are an accounting officer, but an accounting officer only in name, because the funds resides in the various accounting officers in the various government departments. So you are calling the shots to say, this is how briefing ought to happen. But there is an accounting officer on the other side who has got his own preferences. But also to answer your question in the little time that you have given, there is also an issue that has not been addressed, which is resistance to change. We came up with policies. There's a centralized port of call when it comes to consumption of legal services. Just last week, I see the Western Cape province is actually going its way. When there is a policy that has been approved by Cabinet and also noted by Parliament, the 2 houses of Parliament, in relation to the same issue of consumption of state legal services. There's an advertisement now, it has not closed, where they use the euphemism of saying we need to capacitate state attorneys. You cannot actually be capacitating state attorneys if you are a consumer of state legal services. It is the Solicitor General that must capacitate state attorneys. That is another way of actually saying I need to do it my own way. And lo and behold, we'll wait and see what happens with the panel that will actually come out of there. So there is quite a lot of gatekeeping, which in fact was supposed to be dealt with in the first stanza, and also quite a lot of resistance in this space. But I think with the advent of the legal sector code, we needed to use the state as the guinea pig. It's doing well now. We're counting 83% above what the threshold is in relation to briefing and outsourcing of state legal work, and I think we can do much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those important insights. And I think it is quite eye-opening to know that even ourselves as public institutions can do a lot more. And really, one of the things that we wanted to communicate in a session like this today, where we do have quite a lot of SOEs that are represented, and legal people from those teams as well, is that, we need to really be deliberate about some of the things that we do to make sure that as government we can't be falling foul of the exact issue that we're trying to address. Let's go then to Noor again. What are some of the factors that you would say are important to strengthen the sustainability of black firms? And where do you think the opportunities lie for them?
So difficult question, but I think the codes and what we've heard today, they do address partially what it is that needs to happen, and that is access to finance. I mean, that's important. And that's important because based on literally thousands of conversations that I and colleagues of mine have had with clients, global clients, local clients, across the world, state-owned enterprises in other parts of the world. One of the increasingly resonant messages to lawyers and law firms is we want to work with people who understand our business. We want to work with people who understand the sector that we're in. What clients are buying is a little different to when I started practice. And that's why I find it difficult to sell to them, right? But what they're really looking to do is they're looking to buy more solutions and less opinions.
Yeah.
And this resonates with clients all the time. And I think that there's an opportunity in that. And there's an opportunity when we look at, for example, specialization, funds for specialization. If you were to be sector focused, now let's say you were going to take the hospitality sector. We know that there is a bit of opportunity in tourism in this country. If we were going to focus on the hospitality sector as a law firm or as a group of lawyers or a practice within a law firm, within the next literally 18 months, we would stand out as specializing in that area. And that opportunity then presents itself. So when you're speaking to the IDC's hospitality desk and the business development people there, you begin to be identified as specialists in that area. We learned that in our own experience in oil and gas and was able to transition to energy. Our firm was almost at the risk of being identified, oh, they're an oil and gas firm. But here's what the difference was. When these large oil and gas companies needed a lawyer, suddenly you stopped being black. Suddenly they wanted to use the chap or the person or the lady who knew their business because they had a particular problem. And that did give us an opportunity to build different relationships. Now, one of the things that I haven't heard here yet today is the issue of race and racism. I mean, we talk about transformation and we talk about change and policing, but we need to understand that our society is still very much structured based on hard racism. Let me give you an example. I would receive, one of my partners would receive regular instructions from Citibank in New York. But Citibank in Johannesburg has never briefed us, despite the fact that we have been up and down. Their head office briefs us because we can actually do the work. Truth is, they expect us to look the way we do when they look at us from New York. They expect us to look like Africans, and that's exactly what they expect. Top quality work. It's table stakes. Table stakes, right? The competencies can't be negotiated. The trouble is in Johannesburg, they actually expect us to look different. We're not going to look different. So I think if you ask the question, what is it that we can do? Yes, there's a lot government must do. Yes, there's a lot that organized state-owned enterprises and other government agencies can and must do. But then we also, when we just heard my colleague talk about 7 billion rand worth of legal services over a period of time, we're talking about a market that in 2024 was 47 billion rand. It sounds a little like we're in an echo chamber here. We're talking about transformation about 7 billion rand and not about 47 billion rand. And so the question is, therefore, who has the gift of work? The gift of work sits in corporate South Africa. And what is it that we can do as a government, what is it that we can do as practitioners, as a profession, to begin to speak, persuade, and necessarily enforce corporate South Africa to begin to change the shape and the complexion and the texture of our society? They have a contribution to make, and we're a part of the society. We've heard the opening remarks was the legal services business is a material part of what happens in our economy and our society. The dreams, the dashed dreams that we heard of people leaving this profession, I mean, it's devastating. It's sad to hear that, but let me tell you, that is a constant refrain. When you interview people and you ask them, so why are you leaving that firm? They're such a fantastic firm with great, and it's the way people are treated. It's the rabid racism that they face in those organizations that often disguise. That is something we are leaving out of our conversation. And we must hold ourselves accountable for that. Why aren't we talking about it? Are we not supposed to? And so there are mechanisms. I mean, I know we're limited in time, but there are mechanisms that we can think about. When, for example, let's take a state-owned enterprise, is doing a transaction with, I'm going to use a name, let's say Siemens, right? There's a lot of pressure on the state-owned enterprise and the Solicitor General, everybody else, to employ black counsel, but there's no pressure on Siemens, except tangential, through whatever is in their sector and their procurement requirement. We shouldn't be awarding contracts to them if they can't demonstrate far deeper change in our society. So yes, that's not directly the answer to the question that you asked, but these are things that have come out of this morning's discussion. What is it that we can do? So here's one important thing. We can sit back and say, well, the government must do that, the corporate South Africa must do that, but what is it that we can do? Really, we can listen to our clients. And clients across the world are saying, we need people who understand our business. And so I think if you're going to have in the next 2-3 years law firms, now they're not going to have 300 and odd partners, but black law firms who identify themselves as sector specialists, believe me, they are going to change the fortunes not only of their business, but of the opportunities of people they can employ. Thank you.
That's a very important point. The issue of preparedness for what we want to see as well. And I think that the value I got from that input as well, Noor, is the fact that there's a lot of untapped potential in corporate South Africa. In the private sector, may not be easy to access, but there are ways and means, and I think Denton's has succeeded in doing that well. So clearly, you are an example of a firm that has met the need, heard the client, and actually positioned yourself in a way that the issue of what race you may be is second to the fact that you are giving quality legal advice. You are good at what you do, and that came from the area of specialization that you've taken the time to achieve. So let's then move to Lindiwe. And Lindiwe, I'm talking to you from the point of view of a co-DFI, a funder, and maybe, and I know a lot of the people in the room will be interested to understand from our perspective as well, what can law firms do to actually prepare themselves for the opportunities that we offer, and to serve organizations such as the PIC? So the preparedness and readiness, what can we tell the room, what should they do to position themselves from the inside, inside information?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for this opportunity. I must say it's been a very insightful discussion. And as the PIC, we sit in our little corners, and we're quite appreciative of the fact that we can have this conversation with the fraternity. I think the PIC, as a 3.5 trillion rand institution, biggest asset manager on the continent, has a big responsibility in making sure that black law firms participate in that space. I mean,
I don't know how many numbers are in that number, but it's quite a lot of numbers, I would imagine. And I think the PIC from an AUM perspective has grown, but it's really been underpinned by the support that we've been getting from this legal fraternity. I think a lot of the things that we have been able to do is as a result of the law firms that are on our panel. We've got a significant presence on the JSE. I think people would say that, you know, the PIC effectively controls the JSE. Therein lies an additional responsibility to make sure that there's access. So I think the PIC has come out very boldly. The board. And when I talk across, I think gone are the days where we are going you have and what can be done in their, you know, little corner, sitting there making decisions every day? What would you guide them to do? Look, I think it's something that obviously we've had to mull over for a very long time, and I've been listening very tentatively to the discussions about advocates, you know, in the fraternity. You know, I've had so many conversations with a lot of senior counsels who I've taken to task about this because, you know, I think institutions, state-owned institutions such as the PIC have a very big responsibility in making sure that they are serviced by the right team, right? You are the deployers of capital. You should therefore have a say in terms of how that capital is managed, right? So if we are going to sort of, you know, and there is a recognition of the fact that even with the institutionally large firms, there are black people there. There are women there. They need to be supported, right? But that support has to be a very direct support, and we shouldn't be apologetic about the composition of the team that we want on PIC matters. You know, without interfering with the operations of institutions, but if you present to me as a state-owned entity, a public entity with pensioners' funds that I am investing on behalf of, and you are presenting an all-male, all-white team with an all-male, all-white advocate group, you're going back to the drawing board. You are certainly going back to the drawing board. And it really takes people like us in state-owned entities to be very firm, you know, to be very deliberate about what it is that we want to see in these institutions. If we need to talk to the CEOs of these institutions to say, we see a problem, you need to tell us how you're dealing with that problem, we need to have those conversations. And I think it spoke to the earlier point that the CE raised. We're not ostracizing you, but we're saying, have a conversation with us that aligns with our ethos as an institution. I think gone are the days where we compromise transformation
question was, are you coming back here again? Because if you are, this cannot look the way it looks now. And the issue of women, it hasn't been touched on a lot today, and I'm not going to, go into it in the panel discussion, but I do want to make the point that we really need to make an extra effort in terms of women being empowered in the sector, because the statistics are just shocking, and it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't make sense to me. Women empowerment is something that the NEF is very passionate about and very deliberate about, outside of BE or empowerment on its own. And I think we really need to all look at ourselves and say, what steps can we take in our individual businesses to make sure that we do get representation? And it does not need to be convenient. Convenience is just, an excuse for not actually going the extra mile. We need to make it inconvenient. We need to go out there and find those service providers. I mean, and just in closing, I think the point I want to make is that if you take a deliberate approach in everything that you do as SOEs, as government, as private sector, to make these changes that you want to see for the next generation, it can happen. Something as small as, it may seem small, but in putting together this event, there are only black service providers that have been engaged. Every single person that was involved in this it's been an empowered company. They've been small companies to the extent possible. And I mean, even going down to the smallest detail, like the water bottle, the bottled water, comes from an investee that we funded that is a black-owned company that produces this. So if you really think hard about every single rand that you spend and how it should ideally be spent, you will make a change overall, and it actually becomes a habit over time. It's something that we live and breathe as the NEF, but I would encourage everyone in the room to do the same and make sure that you take those steps in your everyday decisions. But I want to thank the panel for your great insights. I think this was very inspiring. Lindiwe has given us also, hope that things are being done out there on quite a large scale. And I'm going to hand back to our facilitator, Ayabonga. Thank you.
Thank you. Please give Karishma and the panel another round of applause. Now, you may be asking, when will the most important people in the room, which is yourselves, get an opportunity to participate? That will come very, very shortly, I can assure you. But before we do that, I want to hand over to the Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, who has been sitting, listening very diligently, to come and give his own reflections in the keynote. I think many of the things we've heard in the panels have also made some pointed remarks to which he may wish to reflect, but also certainly as the champion of transformation himself, is someone well suited today to give us some reflections and remarks. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Zuko Kodlimbi.
Thanks very much, Program Director, and still morning. Good morning to Ms. Kunta and the Butali SC and all the panelists that are here. Almost by design, I was kind of confused at first, but it worked out that I speak after the practitioners. And it helped me because I no longer have to read what I had prepared. All the stats, Ms. Kunda ran through them about the spread, this and that. The kind of thing that we're trying to respond to, essentially. The experiential insights from those who've been on this path for years. I thought I would speak. I'm not a lawyer. Today I can pretend and dress in black because that's what lawyers do. I don't like black suits, but I thought I'm talking to lawyers, I must dress like them. But there's a few things that I want to raise related to what was said here. The first thing to say is that 30 years since the promulgation of BEE policy and so on, transformation is under attack. It's the first point that I want to raise, because when we came into office last year and we inherited the legal sector codes that had not been gazetted, we pressed ahead to get them gazetted, and then there was litigation immediately. One of the first questions we then asked ourselves was, who's going to defend these codes? We see who's litigating against them, but there's a vacuum on someone intervening, saying, this represents exactly what we believe in, and therefore we will defend it as well. That's the one gap that arose. It's an important point because, as a general rule, power does not concede anything without struggle. It doesn't matter how noble the intention is, including the recognition by power that what is being asked for is sensible. But power will still not give up its privilege without struggle. So we must be committed to extensively make the case and litigate where necessary to defend what exists. Now, Butali is tired. He's not skeptical, he's tired. With reason. But one of the things we cannot afford is to get tired. I can't tell you how many things we've been saying over and over again in South Africa that annoy me. A lot of things annoy me. In fact, one of the concerns I have is that we create all kinds of instruments. We call them the Black Industrialist Program. We call them the Pan-African Bar Association of South Africa. In South Africa, even 90% African population, but we must still justify ourselves by naming things and appending our names to them. But it's called the Johannesburg Bar Association. So normatively, therefore, if it is white, it doesn't have to be called the White Johannesburg Bar Association. But for the black ones, it must be called the Pan-African Bar Association, in order to justify your existence as Africans in your own country. Now, all of these notions, they annoy me. If I had it different, I wouldn't call anything black industrialists. We wouldn't even have the National Empowerment Fund and all these kinds of things. I would insist that because it's a majority black country, we need to simply just move and say, the majority must. But unfortunately, this is the point that Butali was making. The social and institutional engineering of power dynamics in South Africa is such that we have no choice but to promulgate counter legislation to reverse that problem. And not to do it is to allow a particular exclusive normative framework to play out. Now, it's also correct that the legal sector codes are not sufficient. I mean, I agree, you said man, the 40%. You unintentionally are saying, aim only for the bare minimum, and the larger stake must be allowed to play out the way that it does. That's the flip side of it. Now, we can have a debate about whether do we need an incremental push upward, sure, but let's accept that there ought to be legal sector codes that provide that framework of discussion, and then we'll improve it as we go forward. The other point, I heard the PIC speak. I was interested on the angle that the PIC will take. And then it dawned on me that it's a lawyer from the PIC as well. I'm interested on the financial side of the arrangement. I'll explain to you why. Mr. Mohammed makes a good point that if you look at the pipeline of candidate attorneys in South Africa, the majority of them are black. It's true. It could be 70%, 80%. I'm not sure about what the dynamic looks like. But the legal profession in South Africa, much like the entire economy, is structured not just as a pyramid, but as an inverted funnel. You know, a funnel is supposed to be wider at the top and then narrow down so that when you pour water, it controls. The problem with our economy is that the funnel is inverted. So you have all this mass of Africans at the bottom who must find all manner of ways to push themselves upward. So you go to law school, you go to an LLB, go to law school. But as you go upward, the funnel starts to narrow down. And then the exit point, I was saying, to illustrate this point, I was saying to Butali earlier, I almost think I know all the black senior counsels in South Africa. Because that's what then the funnel does. You've got all these candidate attorneys, all these lawyers, all these advocates, but the senior counsel, you can count all of them and know all of them by name. It's a very dizzy thing to almost think, I know all these people. I can mention all of them. And then there's another dynamic that happens.